without any further ado, Elizabeth, are you happy to kick us off?
I certainly am. Thanks, Rufus. Hello, everyone. I'm just going to self-describe for those who might find that of value. I go by she, her. I'm early 40s, average height and build. I'm white. I have messy hair, and I'm wearing a stripy top.
Could you slow down?
So sorry.
It's okay.
Let's do it here together. Okay. I'm Elizabeth. I go by she, her. I'm early 40s. I'm average height and build. What else did I say? I have a stripy top, short, messy hair. I'm white.
Thank you.
Thank you. While I'm talking, there's going to be this slideshow of photos running. They're a mixture of production and rehearsal pictures. So my production of The Tempest was intended to be environmentally conscious in both the narrative it told on stage and the process by which that story was brought to life, an eco-dramaturgical endeavour in both form and content. It also attempted to be socially minded, working with a number of community groups to, in part, co-create the show. So I'll begin by telling you about the onstage narrative we tried to highlight. Then I'll talk about how we made it, and then I will talk about the community involvement. And across all, I will attempt to sort of honour the positives, acknowledge the challenges, and share with a spirit of humility and learning. So the play begins with a stage direction that might just be one of the most famous in weather events in theatre history, a tempestuous noise of thunder and lightning. A good reason to make a show climatey, perhaps, but I think it needs to be more than that. I think the play lends itself to an environmental reading for probably other reasons too. It's a story of survival. The play follows a character called Caliban, who's been stranded on the island for several years, and also that of Prospero and Miranda, a parent and child, who have equally eked out a survival existence in very challenging environmental circumstances. There are some characters on the ship whose wreck starts the action of the play who have exploited people and resources, and they are dripping in money and guilt, and the story brings them to face the consequences of their actions. Shakespeare was in part inspired to write The Tempest because of two real events that happened just as he was writing it. One was the wreck of a British ship on an early colonizing expedition to the Caribbean, which thematically raises questions of global inequity and climate justice. And the other was a tsunami that swept up the River Severn in this country just as he sat down to write the play, which raises issues of vulnerability to climate events closer to home. And so through all the choices we made, textual, casting, directorial, we tried to amplify and wrestle with and recontextualize those issues through an environmental filter. And it was important that the narrative on stage was backed up by the way we made it. We wanted everything to be legible to the audience, so content and process visibly reinforcing each other. We scoured the RSC stores, designer Tom Piper and I, for previous bits of set from previous productions. We also worked in partnership with other theatres that he and I were both making shows for at the time. Wow, these guys are speeding through. So with the Kiln and with Wilton's Music Hall, we shared pieces of set and resources. For props, our team sourced discarded objects from beach cleans and from litter picks. For costumes, we went to charity shops. Lighting designer Joe Town hired nothing external, relying on in-house stock. And for sound and music, Adrienne Quartley raided the RSC stores and found a load of instruments originally designed by Evelyn Glennie some years ago. And she repurposed them along with buckets and bin lids, which were all played live during the show. Ariel played a futu jara, which you should be able to see in that picture, which is an instrument made from a drain pipe and a piece of plastic tubing. There were three community partnerships that made this production live its ethics so visibly. The first was these guys. They're called Rubbish Friends. They're a local litter-picking group in Stratford. They pounded the streets and they gave us all of their rubbish, and our props department cleaned them, and then they chose, in partnership with stage management, what to bring into the rehearsal room. And through improvisations, we then decided what to include in the show. So everybody in that chain had creative agency over how the stuff was used. Through workshops on manipulating found objects, our puppetry director, Rachel Canning, developed a language for the magic in the show. This water canister became one of our fearsome dogs. Plastic bags became our harpy. The baddies appeared to choke on fishing nets. We collectively had to hold our nerve on several occasions while we were physically working out how to construct the show as we were rehearsing it. We also worked with these guys, a local forestry organisation who manage woodland through regular coppicing. They gave us their offcuts and they helped create our onstage forest, along with some organic material from a previous show. And our final partnership was schools. So in the story, Miranda and Caliban have been on the island since they were tiny, and school groups of all ages made the artwork and the stuff that gave their kind of lived-in kind of home on stage this very authentic feel. I've asked some of our creative team to share what their key takeaways are from this process. So Jo Town liked working with kit she hadn't worked with before. She repurposed loads of old stuff from the stores, and she put tungsten and LED very visibly in conversation with each other in her design. Costume was, of course, the hardest challenge. Designer Tom and co-designer Natasha Ward did have to find some contemporary costumes. We had to buy some. The RSC stores are wonderful, but not endless. Anything we did buy, we did so ethically, and those are now in store. And our production manager, David Tanqueray, I think found that working with a creative team, a freelance creative team who were bringing stuff in externally to be very exciting for the RSC, but also, of course, logistically challenging. I know that Adrienne, our composer, got a real buzz out of working with Evelyn Glennie's former creations, but definitely found it a push to mix kind of traditional music with invented instruments at the same time, in the tech time, certainly. Our producer, Zoe Donegan, said that leading time was the absolute key to this whole process. So we had a cross-departmental Tempest working group from nearly a year out from production, which meant that everybody from marketing to sponsorship to props to education to community were all talking to each other about the show from a very long lead-in time. And that photo is there because we also had green reps amongst the cast who all came on board knowing that that was the process. And they were present at every production meeting as well. Alex Kingston was our green rep for most of the show. Our prop maker, Lauren Simmons, really enjoyed making, I guess, the authenticity of the process for her, thinking about not just the formation of a prop, but giving new life to a pre-existing object, whilst at the same time ensuring it could then be used again later in another process. And I know Claudine from Rubbish Friends, Claudine Pearson, who runs that rubbish litter picking company, she felt very empowered that volunteer activism could become part of a creative endeavour, both actively benefiting our community. And since the show, there's been a massive uptake in local litter picking. The physical production was inexpensive in terms of sterling spend. We budgeted the show in people hours rather than pound signs, which meant there was time to collect, mend, remake. I guess that's Kate's circular investment, that the materials go back to store, the skills grow the company and the people, and the partnerships give back to the community. Of course, it would be foolish not to acknowledge the privilege of this production. The RSC has a storage footprint which let us house materials. Stratford's quite a contained geographic area with pre-existing civic groups we could link with. And of course, we benefited enormously from skilled in-house painting, making, production staff. So I'm not standing here pretending we got everything right or not without a lot of help. But in principle, I think the model demonstrates that this kind of work can be done at scale. For me, I wanted this show to be generative and not passive. So not just little harm, no waste, but actually a generator of progressive energy itself. So I'm really pleased that it has social and creative momentum. So new members are joining these community groups, new creative teams are now responding to our materials. And I really learnt about the value of networks. We had colleagues in the theatre community who enabled the sharing of set, and also the creative teams from decades old previous productions whose work we joyfully repurposed and remade and repainted. That looks to me like an intergenerational, inter-industry network in action, which is an idea I find imaginatively as well as pragmatically inspiring. And we're also part of a community network, working with local groups on co-creation and social investment in placemaking and shared creativity. The positivity of those two kinds of collaborative networks coming together in the same project was matched by the story on stage, which was unashamedly hopeful. It culminated with this very optimistic worldview, suggesting that healing can happen even in fragile environmental situations. So with eco-hope at its heart, those were just some of the ways that this production attempted to meaningfully engage with green theatre-making practice. Thank you.